Good morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody in the audience. This is Jim Nowakowski, Interline Creative Group, about to give you one of my favorite webinars is really on strategic planning, because if you don't have a strategy, you don't have anything. So I'm very glad to be presenting to you this morning. We have a wonderful audience, pretty jammed room. So take notes. Ask questions, and let's get some of the details out of the way right now. This, of course, is approved by the AIA. So we have architects and designers in the audience who are seeking credit. When we're done with this, we're basically going to open it up for questions, but you will get a certificate. This is also approved by the NKBA. So we have some kitchen designers and bathroom designers and other people associated with the NKB in the audience. We're excited to have you all in the audience. This is copyrighted by Interline Creative Group. However, if you send me an email afterwards, what we'll do is we'll give you a copy of this presentation in a PDF file. But we do encourage questions throughout. You'll see a little question box in the GoToWebinar interface. Just type in your questions there. We'll be happy to answer them as we go through the presentation. This program is about strategy. It's about developing a strategic plan. It's about not only plotting your way through this crazy world we live in now, but trying to understand what you have to do in order to succeed and win. So we're going to try to get a clearer perception of how to respond to these challenges, which, as you know, ladies and gentlemen, they change every day. They just change every day. We're going to review business basics. We're going to examine strategic disciplines that are involved in this, some common elements to the combat environment. You're in a combat environment. Yes, you are. And we're going to learn how to respond to customer challenges, which you all have customers. I see a variety of people in the audience. As I said, this includes architects, designers, and so on. But we all have clients. We all have people who need our services. And we really want to win with our clients. So thank you for being here. Let's roll. Staying in front of your customers is a difficult thing, especially last year when they locked everybody down and now they're mandating masks. And I had a couple of restaurant people in the audience, and thank you so much, because you guys got devastated during COVID. I mean, I can't think of another industry that had it worse than restaurants. So we're going to look at staying in front of cross-selling. Cross-selling is very important. Always be closing, listening for opportunities. These are the essentials of staying in front of your business. From the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep, you should be listening. You should be listening for opportunities that come your way. You should always be listening. And that's an art form in itself, because today people don't seem to listen. They just seem to talk. Isn't that true? Let me open this up by quoting Jim Mattis in his book, Call Sign Chaos. I'm going to be referring to a lot of books on strategy. This is one of them. Jim Mattis was the Secretary of Defense, longtime Marine. He said digital technologies can falsely encourage remote staffs to believe that they possess a God's eye view of combat. In other words, when you're sitting at your dashboard, media people are guilty of this. I just read a report today that from some media guru that said what we really need to do is evaluate just impressions. I don't know if you know what an impression is. I'm creating an impression now with you by just talking to you. But an impression in the world of digital technology is pretty much nothing. You don't know what that means. You don't know who you're impressing or not impressing. And so what Mattis was saying here is that digital technologies can falsely encourage somebody remotely that they're looking at reality, but digital technologies do not dissipate confusion. The fog of war can actually thicken when misinformation is instantly amplified. Ladies and gentlemen, you are in an environment that instantly amplifies misinformation. I don't think there's anyone in the audience. Now, if you disagree, please raise your hand, put a comment in the question box, chat box, whatever you want to do. But it is very difficult today to know what is real and what is not real, what is true and what is false. You shouldn't just believe what I'm telling you. You should verify what I'm telling you against your own judgments. This is true of anything you do. So what I like to do is I like to go to the past, because he who does not study the past is doomed to repeat the failures of the past. And one guy in front of you doing this webinar, Jim Nowakowski, does not like to fail. Although I fail every day, I do not like to lose. And so I studied the past. And David Ogilvy, who is one of the masters of advertising, said advertisers who ignore research are as dangerous as generals who ignore the signs of the enemy. He wrote that in a couple of his books, but he basically is talking about a war situation. You know, business to business, which most of the audience is in, and even business to consumer. Business to business is really legitimate warfare. You're trying to kill the competition. I'm going to quote a great book later on by Jim Ingalls. But you're trying to, kill the competition, take away market share from the competition. You're trying to beat the competition. So there's a lot of war analogies. And David Ogilvy, who was a master craftsman in advertising, said that research is really a secret weapon. Now, direct mail was a secret weapon, but he was a research guy. So you have to do your homework. If you're trying to hatch a strategy to win in this environment, you have to do your homework. For example, if I were to ask you, what is the dominant emotion today that most people feel? It's still fear. It's still fear. People are afraid. They don't know who to believe, what to believe. Do I get a vaccine? Don't I get a vaccine? And you're saying, well, what does that have to do with business? Well, it has everything to do with business, as I'm about to show you. And it has even more to do with the strategic plan that you have to create. Because if you don't know who you're selling to, you're just faking it. And that's going to lead to more problems than you can imagine. And you'll never be able to sell effectively unless you know who you're selling to. Who are your customers? How do these people think nowadays? What do they really, really, really need? You know, one of the things that happened during COVID with the lockdowns is that remodeling took off like a rocket ship. Remodeling. People were realizing that they're home, they don't go to work, they need to remodel. And look what happens when people are going to work now. What does a commercial office space look like now? What is it going to look like down in the future? As a designer and an architect, ladies and gentlemen, you need to know that. If you don't know that, no one's going to tell you this. So, that said, how many customers do you have? Whenever I used to ask this when I gave live webinars, I'd always get some guy in the audience, somebody say, not enough. And that's true. That's always true. But if you have too many, you're going to suffer because you won't be able to keep up. Your service levels will fall. You've been on hold when you call people, especially as you call bigger companies. As they merge and get bigger, you get put on hold. It's very difficult. So one of the mantras of your strategy has to be serving the customers you have in a proper way. You have to make them feel like they're special, right? So the question then becomes in your strategy is how many do you want and how many can you handle and what are your short-term goals? And ladies and gentlemen, you won't be able to answer these questions today, but you should think about them and try to answer them as you go forward when you write your strategy. Because strategic planning will drive these numbers up because ultimately you do want to win, right? Knowing what your target wants, what they need and how they need are going to help you design an effective strategy. For example, an architect specializing in, for example, the school market. We all know what schools are going through now since COVID happened. Teachers unions weighing in, mandating what classrooms should look like, whether or not you're going to have class. It's turmoil. How do you fit that? How does your strategy fit the turmoil? 2 years ago, you didn't even know what turmoil was until COVID hit, and now there's just turmoil day after day. So how does your strategy relate to overcoming turmoil? The path to purchase is very important. You sell services, you sell a product. I have some showrooms who are selling product. Showrooms were closed during COVID. Now they're open by appointment only, and if you do get in by not having an appointment, it's very difficult sometimes because a lot of the showrooms are empty. They're just empty. Some people help you. Some people, I was at a showroom the other day just looking around and the person stood, sat behind the desk the entire time. Is that the way to treat a customer? I'm just asking. So your strategy has ways you want to treat the customer, who your customers are, And basically, everybody in this audience is serving customers with a problem. The solution, where do you find the solution? Is you. I was telling somebody the other day, I was telling a banker the other day how we got started. We got started serving a single client. By the time 10 years later, when we were still serving that client, I was making metal plates for a plumbing company in China and importing them. I'm an advertising guy. I'm a marketing guy. I have nothing to do with making metal plates for signage, in China and importing them back into the United States. But the customer had the problem. They couldn't find anybody to solve the problem. So we stepped up to solve the problem. Ladies and gentlemen, with respect, you are all problem solvers. The situation you face today is that many people don't even know they have a problem. And if they know they have a problem, they cannot define the problem. If you cannot define the problem, you'll never solve the problem. So part of your strategy has to really help the customer understand what the real problem is, right? And that's why research comes in over and over and over again. We're doing more as a company in research than we've ever done in the past. Why? Because people need answers. They don't want to proceed and just start shooting and wasting time and money. Time, by the way, is your most valuable asset. You'll never get it back, and that's why I'm very appreciative you're spending time with me today. So, what have you learned from all your experiences? This is a book by Kenichi Omei, a director at McKinsey. He wrote a book called The Mind of the Strategist. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on this quote with you, and I want you to seriously think about what this guy wrote. In business, as on the battlefield, you see these battlefield references keep coming up. They keep coming up. You know why? Because you are in a battle. You're a battle for market share. You're a battle for business. You're fighting competitors you don't even know are your competitors. That's a whole nother story. The object of strategy is to bring about conditions favorable to your side, to one's own side, judging precisely the right moment to attack or withdraw, and always assessing the limits of compromise. The limits of compromise. There's a lot of things bundled in that sentence. One of them is compromise. Well, Jim, I don't want to compromise anything. Well, you're going to have to. Life is compromise. The question is, how much will you compromise? But you have to know when to attack and withdraw, move, not move. Timing is everything in business. And if this guy is using a chess analogy, which is the essence of strategy, is really understanding when you should move. Besides the habit of analysis, I put those in a different color. The habit of analysis. Ladies and gentlemen, you all have to become analysts. You have to make that a habit. You have to analyze everything. Why am I doing this? Why is this happening? You have to analyze it. And what marks the mind of the strategist is an intellectual elasticity or flexibility. Again, in a different color. Why? Because you want to be flexible. You cannot believe, you can have a thesis, but you have to be flexible enough when you're analyzing something that you really can see objectively what the heck is in front of you, which enables you to come up with realistic responses to changing situations. And ladies and gentlemen, situations today are changing constantly. They changed constantly before COVID, but now we can see physically the changes going on with the news cycles, with the tweets, with everything. And you don't do this to simply discriminate with great precision among the shades of gray. You do it to really understand what you have to do and when you have to do it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the essence of strategy. Because the goal of strategy is to win. It's not to lose, it's to win. The question is, how do you win business? It's making judgments on what you do and when you do it. What you should do and when you should do it. Timing and what you should do. Should I write a direct mail letter? Should I send out a press release? Should I run an ad? I had a client that came to us during COVID that signed us up for services. And the first thing he did when he opened his mouth is basically say, Interline, Jim, I want to run advertising, print advertising. I was floored. Very few clients were running print advertising during COVID and even before COVID because print advertising is undergoing a metamorphosis. But when he said that, I was delighted, and we helped him, and we ran for a year and a half great campaigns, testimonial ads, unbelievable campaigns. Lo and behold, we found out why, because he was selling the company. Many people in the past talk about reliving the past, but I was so excited I forgot that when people do things out of the ordinary, there's always a reason. And this company was selling the company. And he wanted to look big, so he ran advertising. There's nothing wrong with that. And certainly nothing wrong, especially the way we run advertising. And we don't just run ads, we have accountability and metrics built into our ads. But it was very disappointing to see because the new owners just stopped immediately. That's what new owners do. But that's okay. Judgments are strategic when they're made realistically. They're never knee-jerk reactions. It's not like you get hit in the face and you want to hit back, right? You never knee-jerk reaction. You practice, 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 so that when a situation arises, you know exactly what to do based on your strategy. That's that intellectual flexibility. So if you're going to do a strategy, you have to open your mind. You cannot think like you have before. For example, a cautious person, when it's time to act suddenly, doesn't know how to do so, so he's ruined. A cautious person. What does that mean? That means throw it to the wind and just be free and carefree and blah, blah, blah. Absolutely not. It means that you have to practice for those times to act suddenly. What can impact you suddenly? The payroll checks don't show up. You know, your big client fires you. Something happened. Last Friday, we got fired by a client, a small client, but nevertheless, he wanted to pull things in-house to a different provider for the web. And so we had a quick meeting, we understood it, and we said, we'll be happy to help you. And he was stunned. He was stunned that we were happy to help him transition after he just fired us. So actually what happened is we retained some of the business. He didn't move everything, he moved something, right? That's what, because we're prepared for that. We are prepared to be fired at any moment. We know exactly what to do because we've hatched out our strategy. You have to erase your blackboard. What does that mean? John Locke wrote, a great philosopher, said that when people are born, they have a blank blackboard. Blackboard, of course, is dating us, and now we just don't have blackboards anymore, right? But people start writing on your blackboard. They start putting things on your blackboard, and they start writing it, and before you know it, your blackboard is full of things that other people have written on your blackboard that you don't even know you believe. You understand what I'm saying? So your object of the game in writing your strategy is to erase your blackboard. Direct mail doesn't work. If you believe that, somebody wrote that on your blackboard. Just erase that. I'm not saying it works. I'm just saying that if you're going to understand direct mail or anything, you have to erase your blackboard. You cannot have a preconceived notion. We went to a client once and he said exactly that. Direct mail doesn't work. Now, he had a clearly defined audience. He was trying to target fire protection contractors who installed sprinkler systems. Well, that's a highly defined audience. You can find these people, even then, years ago, before the internet. So when he said direct mail doesn't work, he tried it. I said, how many times did you try it? He said, once. I said, I see. If you try one thing once and you write it off, you're making a huge mistake. Because maybe if you understand anything about direct mail, it could have been the list, it could have been the offer, it could have been the creative. It could be many different factors why that tactic did not work. And you owe it to yourself to understand why it doesn't work. You owe it so you have to erase your blackboard and you have to become students. Some of the reading you might do are found on blogs on my website. These are blogs I personally wrote over the years. I'm not saying you have to read them, but they're good stories. When you want to understand strategy, who's on first when it's about strategy, if you Google those words, selling the why and why it ain't so. There's a terrific guy who's out there preaching why you should know the why of selling. I'm not going to give you his name, but it's in the blog. He's built a career and a whole business around selling why. Don't worry about the features, the benefits of your service or product. Just sell the why. In other words, why? Understand why people want to buy. I was at a remodeling seminar, a NIMRA seminar once, a few years back, where the presenter was presenting the Simon Sinek. Okay, I gave you his name. Was giving you his theory on selling the why. And as he was talking about that, midway through his presentation, 8 contractors, these were remodelers in the audience, raised their hand and started telling the presenter, well, wait a minute. That's exactly what I'm doing, and I'm losing business. Why am I losing business? And they had a great discussion, only to find out that if everybody's doing the same thing, you are not really differentiating yourself from other people, because the contractors lament, which is all of our lament sometimes, is that people buy on price. And yet there are situations where people will pay more for a service just because it's being given by someone. As an example, there's a great book on selling written by a British guy that talks about a contractor in New Jersey who would get up and run 20 miles a day. And he basically ran those 20 miles to get in shape, 10 miles, 20 miles a day to get in shape for his contractor. But he had a nickname, and his nickname was Cockroach. And when the writer of the book finally had the nerve to saying, why is your nickname Cockroach? He said, it's because every time I get into a house, they can't get me out. And the writer of the book said, what do you mean? He says, I keep finding projects. I find a project here, a project there, and I build a relationship with that person so they can't keep me out. That's why my nickname outside of that, my clients don't call me a cockroach, but I'm nicknamed as Cockroach with other remodelers and his peers. That's what you want to do. You want to be invaluable. What's love got to do with a B2B brand? A lot of people think that people buy on price. And while that's many times that's true, that's not the only reason people buy your service or product. It can't be, because you can never be the lowest price, can you? Sometimes you believe you can. Amazon believes they can be. They have algorithms on products that they sell that go patrol the internet, and if they see a lower price, they immediately drop their price. Now, there's an old story about Coke machines or Pepsi machines in a warm climate that when the temperature rises above a certain temperature, they increase the price of the Pepsi or the cola in that machine. That's called the Internet of Things these days, when sensors talk to other sensors. And why am I sharing that story with you? Because the price of a Coke or a Pepsi is a commodity. Can you think of anything more than a commodity? But circumstances, people will pay more for that commodity when it's hot outside. You see what I'm trying to tell you? You have to erase your blackboard and think differently. And one of my favorites that I wrote was using a laser or flashlight to solve the problem. If you focus too closely, you may not see everything you're looking at. And if you focus too broadly with your, outside of that, you may miss the fact that this guy's got the tail. So you need both your peripheral vision and your focused vision. And then one of my personal favorite is the problem with dots. Jim, let's just connect the dots. Can you connect the dots for us? When you read this blog, you'll see that I wrote this blog because I'm colorblind. I cannot see the dots. You see, I can't see numbers and dots. So I've trained myself to see your red. But if you ask me, I'm red, green, colorblind. But if you ask me to describe what I see when I look at red, I have no idea what to tell you because you can't see me as a reference point. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why you have to erase your blackboard. You cannot see red and say everybody sees what I see. They just don't. You have to learn to see what they see. And there's a lot of good books out there. You can read all about it, right? Good to Great, Michael Porter's books. I'm not saying to read these books. I'm just saying if you need a book, these are the books you can read because they're out there. But the essence of strategy is in 3 simple words: anticipate, react, and adapt. I'm going to repeat them: anticipate, react, and adapt. You anticipate something, you react to it, and then you adapt your reaction, because anytime you do that, That's why strategy is so important, because the strategy document, the document you create, how you're going to act when something happens, guides your initial reaction, and then you're going to have to adapt to it to what happens when you react to it. It sounds like I'm using a lot of words meaninglessly. Let me give you an example. If you have a strategy that says when a client fires you, you get really angry, and you do not cooperate, with that firing. You just suck it up and say, okay, goodbye. That's one strategy. When a client fires you, another strategy is make the transition seamless. Make it, in other words, I regret your decision, but let me make this painless for you. That creates a totally different impression. That's a strategic decision. It's not an emotional decision. Even though emotionally you may be angry, blah, 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 but your strategy keeps you focused on cue on what you need to do. I was at lunch with a client once. This was $1 million a year business for us. This was several years ago. So we were at lunch, and rarely go to lunch with clients, but this was an exception. We were having a wonderful lunch, and then the client turned to me and she said, one more mistake. I'm here to tell you, don't shoot the messenger, but one more mistake, and you're done. And without hesitation, ladies and gentlemen, without hesitation, I looked at the director of marketing and I said, well, then you might as well fire me now. And that threw her off completely, because, when somebody threatens you and you're $1 million piece of business and tells you one more mistake and you're done, the first thing you should do is start sweating, right? But I had already written into my strategy and practice what I would do if that ever happened. Not in those words, but what if I lost that business? What would I do? Well, first of all, if I lost the business, someone would have to tell me the reason for losing the business. And if I lost the business from my own fault, from my own failures, that's one thing. But when a client shoots a bow shot like that at you, one more mistake and you're done. Okay? But it's not me, it's the owners telling you this, telling me to tell you this. How should you react? With fear, trepidation? Oh, please don't fire me. Of course not. And I looked and I said, well, you might as well fire me now. And you can't mean that. I said, I absolutely mean that, because I'm a human being and human beings make mistakes. Now, you can't argue with that. How do you argue with that? And then the conversation proceeded, and then, and eventually ended up and said, is that what you want me to tell the owners? I said, of course. That's exactly what you should tell the owners. Now, mind you, I had a relationship with all the owners already. So they could ask me this myself, right? But they didn't. They sent the director of marketing in. That's part of your strategy, is understanding all the pieces on the chessboard. She took the message back to them, and the next thing you know, I got an email saying, we'd like to see the work you've done for the last 2 months for us. Within 15 minutes, they got the spreadsheet in Excel with all the work we've been doing for them, okay? Not only that, they wanted the charges. When I put those charges in, not only that, I realized that somehow I was not charging enough money for the services we were providing. Even though the director of new business development had told me repeatedly, you should raise your prices. And I said, I can't do that. I'm doing too much business with you. What do you think I did after that? I raised my prices. We worked for that company for 4 more years. I'm just telling you, your strategy has to define how you act with your clients. You cannot let them do that. So one of the books I really like is Marketing Warfare by Rice and Trout. In this thing, they're going to give you 4 strategies: defensive, offensive, flanking, and guerrilla. Again, here we go. It's the battlefield. I had a client once too that said, why do you keep using battlefield strategies? Why do you keep using war analogies when you're talking about marketing? Because, ladies and gentlemen, marketing is legitimate warfare. When I say legitimate warfare, I mean you're trying to kill the competition, and you're using different tactics to do that. Flanking maneuvers, offensive, when to be defensive. This is a great book for you to read and think about strategies, because you don't use the same strategy across the board. Only fools do that. I worked for a guy who had the proven formula. This worked every time. Trade shows, magazines, the proven formula. And, trade shows around people that were buying his magazines, blah, blah, blah. Until little companies started springing up and doing trade shows within trade shows. They started stealing his audience. He didn't know what to do. He sold his company for lots of money and retired, and he's probably long gone now. Strategies only work as you execute the strategy. Remember, anticipate, react, and adapt, because things change. And you have to test your strategies all the time. For example, you might flank on a lower price. You might do research and find out so-and-so, in the architecture world is charging so much for that type of consulting work. And you say, well, maybe in this Detroit, I should lower my price. I don't know, because I don't know the details of your particular situation. But Trout and Rice give you wonderful ideas on how to do this. You might, a guerrilla strategy is to pick a target. Here's a good example from the book I'm about to show you in a minute. Home Depot is a formidable competitor. They're very smart people. They came in and decimated the home center business. Would you agree with me on that? Now, how did they do that? They didn't do that by talking. They did it by action. They got their differentiation, which is everyday lower pricing, and they went into territories. Orlando, they started going into territories and just upsetting and disrupting the marketplace, much to the disappointment of all the other home centers who are enjoying a good business. This is a classic blue ocean, red ocean strategy, which, by the way, is a great book to read as well. So they go, a major brand didn't want to carry them, didn't want to give their brand to the Home Depot, so they created a sub-brand, which many people do. But Home Depot wanted the main brand. This is a big, very famous plumbing company. So Home Depot said, give me the territory where you're not doing well. And they gave them San Diego. So they brought in the brand into the Home Depot San Diego stores. And what they were afraid of happening, which was losing their distribution from their other regular distributors, never, ever happened. What happened is that they not only sold more of their product through the Home Depot, the other distributor channel that they were using actually bought more as well to fight the Home Depot. So they created basically a fighting situation where they just sat back and reaped the profits from sales. That book is Breakthrough Retailing. Highly recommended. I just reviewed it for KB Resource, which is a media outlet. You can find it at kb-resource.com, and it's called Street Fighter. In fact, Jim Ingalls just sent me a book. After he read the review, I'm stepping away for a moment, grabbing the book. His PR person said, Jim would like to send you a signed copy of his book because he read the review and he really liked it. Well, he liked it because I told the truth. And it says, Jim, thank you for the outstanding book review. You really, truly get it. That's a compliment. Not because I truly, really get it, because I really got it. He just wrote the book on it. And that book contains information for strategy. This is if I were to teach a course on strategy, like on a semester basis, this would be one of the books that I would teach from. There's many others, but this would be one because if you're a retailer, and I know I have retailers in the audience, you should read this book. It'll teach you exactly what Home Depot did and the type of tactics you yourself can do. Dostoevsky's reference is Notes from Underground, because that's what the subtitle should be. It's really a sneak peek at how they did what they did. So strategy requires discipline. What does that mean? You're going to face problems each and every day. How you respond to these should be based on your strategy. You cannot take it from the hip. You cannot shoot from the hip. You cannot just be emotional. You have to be rational. And strategy makes you be rational. For example, you have to write a strategy of what you do when you lose a client, which is different, maybe, than what you do when you win a client. When a budget gets cut, what's your strategy? Do you just accept the cut, or do you do something else? When I was an agency guy and I was called a copy contact guy and writing articles, the client flew in from Atlanta and fired us, basically said, you guys are done. He left. My boss was in a panic. Who do we cut? Because agencies used to like to fire people. And they said, you know, because I was the account executive in there, I was going down to Atlanta at least twice a month and staying for a week at a time. And they said, what do you want to do? I said, I think I should just keep going down there because first of all, this is not, I'm not going to let this happen. What do you mean? You can't, he's the client. He can fire you. I said, I understand that. And I understand he did, but we have some projects in motion and just let me keep going down there and let me see what I could do. I retained the business for 3 more years because that's called feet on the ground. And if you're there when problems happen and you're there, you can solve that problem. So when budgets that get cut, do not just accept it as a budget cut. One of our main clients in the years past cut their budget in October and said, I ran out of money. I said, well, that's okay. I'll support you for the next 2 months. This is $1 million, another $1 million client. They said, what are you talking about? I said, well, you can't just stop marketing just because the economy tanked. This is one of the depressions or the recessions. I said, I'll support you for the next 2 months. That was an unbelievable gesture to the tune of $100,000 a month. Who does that? Well, somebody who's devoted and understands strategic principles, because it's not throwing money down the drains. It's an investment in the relationship. And if you understood anything about strategy and interline strategy, it's the relationship is the key to the puzzle. Your strategy should involve creating and maintaining relationships. So when the problem arises, your strategy should guide your response. Don't panic. Panic is the enemy of success. And not knowing what to do, isn't it a horrible feeling? I can't imagine anything more horrible than not knowing what to do. It's got to be dilapidating. Jim, are you saying you always know what to do? I'm saying I always have a strategy on most things. And when I confront something that I don't know what to do, my strategic thinking kicks in and I anticipate, react, and adapt. I'm telling you the truth. For example, in 2009, this was the headline in Crane's business. Executives are scared to death. You remember 2009? 2009 changed everything for us, for you. 2009 was horrible. You could say COVID is horrible, but 2009 was even worse, right? It was, you remember that. Everybody was crazy. And fear, you know, there was fear then, there was fear during COVID, but that was a different type of fear. But fear is fear, right? What strategy does is it eliminates the pause that fear causes. What does that mean? That means you have to practice your reactions to situations. The Navy SEALs do not become Navy SEALs by thinking about what they would do. They actually do it. They practice. And that's because they have a strategy. These are the 9 common elements you encounter in a combat. This is from a Marine training manual. Let me go through these very quickly. Violent, unnerving sights and sounds. Casualties, people get fired, losing job, confusion, lack of information, feelings of isolation. I mean, if I were to change the title as you read these things to, you know, in a virus-infected environment, this is the same thing we're all experiencing. As a business person, you can't do that. You have to train yourself to overcome fear, to help your clients overcome fear, to make them feel comfortable in doing business with you. This is true today as it was during any combat environment. The only way you know, oh, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Yeah, that's a cool statement, but it has nothing to do with reality. The reality is that you overcome fear by being fearless, and you become fearless when you truly understand what the problem is and what you're up against. We had a client whose reps called, you know, his main competitor shared the same reps in many cases. And so they issued a dictate to the representatives. Choose him or us. You can't have both. So my client was panicked. He said, I'm losing all my reps. They're defecting to the competition because the competition, right, had a bigger brand in the marketplace. So my client, who had the secondary brand, but still a powerful brand, was losing it. He said, Jim, I had a 40-year-old representative on the phone crying. He was crying. that I served you for 40 years, but I can't give up the commissions on this other guy. I have to leave you. What kind of loyalty is that? So I'm listening to my client. And I said, well, this is a great opportunity. And there was silence on the phone. He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, look at it this way. This is a chance to, first of all, you're not going to lose everybody, right? He goes, no, I got one or two that stayed with me. Okay, those are your seasoned guys. They like you. But now you get to refresh your entire rep force. Let's do something to promote those new reps that you're hiring. What do you mean? Let's do a PR program. Let's give them special pricing. Let's do something to make them feel like the gods of your product, and put these other people on notice that they're in a fight. It was one of the most successful turnarounds that I've ever been, privileged to work on. Totally, the competitor did not see this coming. He didn't know what hit him when we started doing this type of stuff. It's the same thing with product innovation story. This guy had the greatest product, but it failed in the field. Now what? Now what do? Well, you do crisis management. You don't let these problems overcome what you know you have to do to fix it. And the only times you know what to do to fix it is if you write a strategy and study strategy. Strategy is combined into two things: offense, defense, flanking, right, and guerrilla warfare. Those are strategic positions. You can't do all of them. Sometimes you attack, sometimes you defend. But you have to think about that. The worst thing that can happen to you in business is losing your business, right? Isn't that the worst thing that can happen? I was giving a seminar to young high school YEA students. These are the Young Entrepreneurs Academy throughout the United States. And we were discussing what's the worst thing that can happen. Well, we could lose a client, we can lose a vendor, we can, the supply chain breaks down, yada, 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 right? One kid was raising his hand, jumping up and down. I finally called on him and said, yes, Jeffrey, what is it? He goes, assassination is the worst thing that can happen to you. Assassination. And I was stunned. You see, I'd never heard that. Right? Maybe you've heard it. I don't know if you did. And I said, why do you say that? He says, because in my country, that's what they do. They assassinate. And he was from the Philippines. See, I live in the United States. He lived in the Philippines. Assassination is the worst thing that can happen to your business. Your strategy has to make decisions to prevent assassination from happening. Hire some guards. You know what I'm saying, right? Your goal is to win. Well, Jim, are you saying we have to win at any cost? I'm saying you have to use the costs to win. You have to think strategically to win. Remember this: things happen. They're going to happen whether your strategy is there or not. Your strategy has to be developed in order for you to deal with those things as they happen. Very difficult. It's very difficult to anticipate anything. Jim, I had a near miss coming, on the weekend on the road. Near miss. A few minutes earlier, a minute earlier, a minute later, seconds earlier, seconds later, it would have been a different story. So strategically, what I do when I drive a car is I drive defensively. I use a defensive strategy, not an offensive strategy, which is road rage, right? I use a defensive strategy. So not only when this guy went crazy and almost hit the guy in front of him and then swerved into my lane, I was prepared for it because I saw it through my peripheral vision. I swerved just in time, got out to the shoulder, got back. He missed that car in front of him. He came into my lane, went around that car. All was well, but it was a near miss. That would never have happened if I was not aware and not driving defensively and did not have a strategy to do when some guy comes into your lane. If you don't have a strategy when things happen to your business, all you're doing, ladies and gentlemen, is reacting. It's a reactive thing, not a strategy is proactive. It's not reactive. So your actions are important. Of course, they're important, right? But the reaction that's based on strategy is most important. So what do you think most companies did when the virus hit? What do you think they did? They were totally in turmoil. Some didn't, some had the plan executed, but they didn't know what to do because they had no strategy. Some people will tell you they executed flawlessly. Well, that's great. Did business pick up? The only businesses that were really smoking were resin producers who made the plastic plexiglass, right? Or the mask people. But they adapted and they changed. Like 3M started making ventilators, right? People adapt to these things. If you have a strategy, you will react to the event based on strategy. There's a world of this difference between reacting, right, and proactive. The personnel manual story is a good example. We were in a meeting with executives and someone asked, do I really need a personnel manual? I really want to write one. And someone was advising him to write one for the executives differently than the people that work for him. And right away I said, this is not right. And I personally don't have a personnel manual because the lawyers who visited, I have great lawyers, they said, Jim, the way you run your company, you don't need anything. If people, we're all adults. Most of my team has been with me over 20 years. So I'm not saying you don't need one. I'm not saying you don't need one. I'm just saying you don't, if you do a personnel manual, you cannot write it differently for your executives than you do for your people. That's total discrimination. That would be horrible. And yet the person in this meeting was taking that advice. Even though I said that doesn't sound right to me. What's your strategy with COVID? On our website, there's plenty of information on what you should do in marketing and sales on COVID. And part of our strategy is that the most valuable asset in a business are its people. Its people are the most valuable. That's in my business. So every decision strategically we make in this business is based on people, the people that work here. Because we're in business to make money, aren't you? Or are you in business to help people? Yeah, okay. You gotta, without money, you can't help anybody. So you're in business to make money. Now, how do you make that money? You make money by using people effectively. And how do you do with the people if you are in the service business? I just read today, that Amazon is hiring 125,000 people for the holiday season. I have two things to say about that. One, good luck, because most people don't want to work because of the government paychecks. But two, if they do go through with that, what's that mean for the rest of us? What's your strategy if you need to hire people during the holiday season and Amazon has just sucked up 125,000 of them? This is what I'm talking about. You read and you think and you get information. This all has to play into your strategy. Amazon's hiring of 125,000 people will not have any effect whatsoever on Interline Group. None, because we're not a holiday company. These are my three favorite strategies. The first quote says, speed in development is the very first law. Every piece must be developed in one move. Aaron Nimzovich is a great chess master. He wrote a great book on chess. And he talks about moving and developing your pieces quickly, neatly, efficiently. It's a great book. He's a great strategist. You should read the book. The SEALs do place a premium on brute strength, but there's an even bigger premium, ladies and gentlemen, on speed. Now you see the word speed in both of those quotes. The second one was by Marcus Luttrell in a book called Lone Survivor. It's an excellent strategic book. It's not just about, they made the movie about it, but I encourage you to read the book. It's a much better book, and it has strategy on how to fight effectively. The third quote, the first rule of flight control is if you don't know what to do, don't do anything. That's Gene Kranz, failure is not an option. The first rule of flight control is if you don't know what to do, don't do anything. Well, there's a danger in not doing anything, isn't there? There's situations like that. But in his case, if you don't know what to do and you do the wrong thing, you're going to crash. You're going to bring that thing down. So there's a lot of wisdom in that. If you don't know what to do, don't do anything. That's why you have to practice scenarios to develop your strategy. Because you want, if you don't know, you never want to be in a position where you say, I don't know what to do. We had a notice from our bank recently that they were bought by another bank and they're changing accounts. All of our account numbers are going to change. I called up the bank and I said, you're giving me, I've been with this bank 20 years. You've never given me a reason to change, which is an action, which is part of my strategy. But now you're giving me a reason. and they said basically there's nothing they can do about it. They're going to investigate, but they feel, what do you think I'm going to do? What do you think I was prepared to do with my strategy? Well, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you what it is. If you're going to do it anyway, you might as well use the opportunity to look at other people, other banks. Because as the bigger get bigger, as the mergers go on, as big companies get to, you know who benefited over COVID and the lockdowns? Amazon, right? You know this. Amazon grew terrifically. Why? They got bigger than ever, right? Big companies got bigger. Costco, right? Home Depot. The bigger you are, the longer you were able to last, and the more gentle treatment you got from government agencies. If you were a small business and you tried to do what those guys did, you got killed. I got several examples of that. So part of your strategy sometimes is staying below the radar. You don't have to puff up your feathers and brag about what you're doing. Just stay below the radar and stay in business. It really depends. And that's why the last quote, anticipate, react, and adapt, is from my hero, Alexander the Great. He conquered most of the world. So think about this. Strategy is about setting up conditions to achieve your win. So that's what you want to do. You want to make it easy for your customers to do business with you, make them comfortable, overcome their fear. And since you can't exist in the same way, there's no two architects in the audience or designers that make their living identically, you have to differentiate yourself. Right? You have to think, you can't think that all businesses are like yours and, oh my God, it's the world, the sky is falling. It's not true. And so whenever companies or individuals compete for an essential resource, in this case, customers or cash, sooner or later, one's going to win. You want to be the one to win. You either are the displacer or you're the one being displaced. And there was so much displacement since COVID hit in 2020, wasn't there? And I'm not saying we can argue about the origin and all that stuff. I'm just talking about surviving in business. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been in business over 30 years. We're still standing despite 9/11, despite 09 crash, despite COVID. You know why? Our strategic principles, our service and unduplicated knowledge, those have not changed. We do everything we can to support that and to support our clients. That determines what we do. So the essence of strategy is making judgments on what you do and when you do it, what you should be doing. If the marketplace doesn't want your services, nothing you do, nothing will convince them of that. Nothing. I don't need it. I don't need you. I mean, how often have you, I'm going to do it myself, especially in marketing where we deal in intangible ideas, right? Everybody's got ideas because of the internet. But guess what? Just like you can't believe everything on Google, not all ideas are created equal, are they? Service businesses are unique because they can spring up anywhere. If you really realize what has happened since COVID and look at the number of new companies that have sprung up and the number of older companies that have been displaced, it's amazing. Even restaurants, as I alluded to earlier, some of them started opening up local kitchens in a mall. So the high-end restaurants would rent a kitchen. And you can read about this. Very innovative, right? You can't come in for the food, they'll bring the food to you, right? They'll do whatever they can. So think. Your strategy has to encompass what people want, not what you have to offer. It never was like that. It's about what they want. Give them what they want. Well, they don't want anything right now. Well, then, right? That's not true. Every person that is your customer wants something, whether it's peace of mind, overcoming their fear. What am I going to do when this is over? What should I do now? They need advice. You have to become trusted advisor. And your differentiation may be your pricing, et cetera, your product, your service. But the purpose of strategy is to overcome that hesitation when events occur. When that phone rings, when we're done today, and one of your clients says, you know what? I really don't have a budget for next year. What should you do? What should your strategic position be? Right? And write it down. My strategy would be, how far was it cut? What was cut? Is there anything left? Are there other budgets that have not been cut? Training, for example, is often a separate budget in marketing, right? So we're moving all of our stuff to training. Well, that's great. I can write copy for training. We can help you with training, right? Well, educational, facilities. I'll give you a good example too. Warehousing, right? Warehousing. We read a press release about a guy who's increasing his warehousing because it's growing. Now, if I were to tell you that's a true statement, that more warehouses are being built now than they have been in the past, you probably would believe me, mainly because you probably think that Amazon is building warehouses like crazy, right? And you'd be right, except you'd be wrong. Because Amazon is only 2% of all the 1,500 new warehouses being built in the planning stage right now. Should I repeat that? Amazon is only 2% of all the new warehouses being built in the planning stage right now. Now, how do I know that? Because we have databases that tell us this information. So if you were to just target Amazon warehouse and you say to yourself as an architect, I cannot compete, I cannot get that Amazon business, you'd be missing 98% of the market that you can get. Do you understand what I'm talking about? You have to keep feeding yourself relevant facts and overcome your fear and understand what's truly the problem. And you have to practice all the time. What time is it? Oh my gosh, 4 minutes left. I would personally like to thank you for your time. I saw a lot of attention in the audience. People paid attention. Thank you so much. And I'd like to open it up for questions now. Are there any questions? Just pop them in your question box. Terry says, you talked a lot about strategy being anticipating, reacting, and adapting. Can you clarify a little bit more about that? Thank you, Terry. I try to be clear with that, but I'll try to be even more clear. Anticipation means you never know what's going to happen, so you try to anticipate what will happen. And in business, there's a lot that can happen every day. You could lose an account, a shipment can fail. I mean, I cannot tell you what that. Strategy means the reaction. Your strategy is the reaction part of anticipate, react. It writes out in your strategy what you should do. For example, we ship a lot of soap. One of my businesses is shipping soap for automatic soap dispensers, believe it or not, but that's another story. We have a strategic position in there that if the person needs the soap and he's a good customer and he's in a situation where he has no soap, we're going to fund it and we're going to overnight it to him on our cost. That's a strategic position. That's a strategic position based on we will probably keep that customer for life. Because, customer retention is as important, if not more important, than customer acquisition. Would you agree with that? So, Terry, the answer to your question is anticipate, react, and then adapt, because sometimes when we offer that to that person, the customer says, no, that's okay, just send it regular. Great, we'll send it regular, but the offer was still out there. The offer was still out there and created more or less a positive impression. And I said earlier, impressions don't mean anything, but they do. When you can document them, not digital impressions, but that's a documented impression. Okay. Anything else? Do I have any other questions? I must have succeeded. Thank you. On behalf of everyone here at Interline, I'd like to thank you for your hour. If you have any questions, you can contact me, jim@interlinegroup.com, jim@interlinegroup.com. You can call me, 847-358-4848. You can call me, 847-358-4848. You can actually go to past CEUs on our website if you want to relive the experience. This one is recorded and will be posted shortly. You can follow me on Twitter at InterlineJim. I tweet, not as often as I used to, but I'm still a pretty heavy tweeter. And again, we'd really like to help you with this. So if you request me by email a PDF file of this session, I will be happy to share it with you. So on behalf of everyone at Interline, thank you very, very much for your time. Because remember, the only truly non-renewable resource, the only one, is time. And you've given me a lot of your time, and I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much.